Syria's health ministry says one person was killed and 18 injured after Israel increased airstrikes in apparent support of Syria's Druze community. In Suwaida, in Syria's south, Druze leaders are divided over a ceasefire deal with the Syrian government, which is aimed at ending days of clashes that threaten to unravel the country's post-war transition.
Clashes on the streets of Suwaida. Syrian government forces engage in gunfights with Druze militias. The troops had been sent here to quell the unrest that has been going on for days between the Druze religious minority and Bedouin tribes. But their presence only seems to be adding fuel to the fire. The death toll on both sides keeps climbing. Meanwhile, Israel, which sees the Druze community as an ally, has resumed strikes on Syrian troops in the area.
Our interests in Syria are known, are limited and are clear. First of all, to maintain the status quo in the region of southern Syria, which is also close to our border, and to prevent the development of threats towards Israel in this area. The second thing is to prevent harm to the Druze community.
In a show of force, Israel's army also targeted the Syrian army headquarters in Damascus. Syria's defense ministry asked the capital's residents to stay indoors. Chaotic scenes too at the buffer zone in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. Druze from the Israeli-controlled area breached the border fence, apparently to join the fight in support of their fellow Druze in Suwaida. Israel's Prime Minister urged them to turn around.
You are citizens of Israel. Do not cross the border. You are risking your lives. You can be murdered, you can be kidnapped, and you are harming the efforts of the IDF. Therefore, I ask you, return to your homes, let the IDF operate.
Suwaida, the Golan Heights, and now Damascus, all are dealing with the consequences of violent clashes, which threaten to escalate into a conflict, affecting the whole region.
Let's explore this with Eylon Levy. He's a former Israeli government spokesperson. Welcome to DW. Just explain to us how you think bombing Syria's capital keeps the Druze minority safe.
Israel is staging a humanitarian intervention now to protect the Druze minority of Syria. Israelis, Druze and Jews alike have been horrified to see the images of elderly men having their mustaches shaved off, other atrocities. And that's why Israel has done two things. One, attack Syrian troops that have been trying to enter Suwaida. But two, attacking the General Staff building in Damascus, which was used to launch those troops towards Suwaida and send a very clear message to the regime. Druze civilians must be protected. We will not allow you to harm them.
As far as we outside the country, the region are concerned, what appears to have happened is there's been a long-standing beef, if I can put it that way, long-standing rivalries between Druze and Bedouin clans in that region. The Syrian government intervened to try and keep the peace, and then Israel bombed them. Just explain to us how that works and why Israel didn't go through the diplomatic channels first to say to Syria, we're concerned about what's happening in the south of your country.
That is not what human rights observers on the ground are reporting. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights is reporting at least 21 extrajudicial executions in Suwaida by regime forces or forces loyal to the regime. And Israel looks at Suwaida and says we cannot allow a fellow religious minority to be persecuted by Islamist forces.
Okay,
let's remember
my question still stands though. My question still stands though. Let's say that that's what's going on. Israel sees these terrible things happening in the south of Syria. Why doesn't Israel say to Syria, this is a terrible thing, you need to sort this out? How does Israel take it upon itself to just start bombing?
Because Israel is physically stopping the formerly Al-Qaeda-led government of Syria from attacking a religious minority.
Thank you.
And the demand for that. Now, I want to explain why.
No, because I'd like. There's quite a lot I'd like to get through. I just want to get to the point of why the diplomatic angle was skipped over.
Well, Israel does not have diplomatic relations with Syria because Syria does not recognize the state of Israel. Israel hopes that Syria will want to establish diplomatic relations, just as we seem to be on the cusp of relations with Saudi Arabia and possibly with Lebanon. If the October 7th war ends with an outbreak of peace and normalization in the region, that will be a positive development. But obviously, that's not going to come at the expense of persecuted minorities in the Middle East.
Understood. What then do you think the Syrian government would have to do for Israel to stop bombing Syria?
Israel wants the border region to be demilitarized. The lesson that Israel drew from the October 7th attacks by Hamas is that we cannot afford to have hostile forces amassing on our border and hope for the best. Israel looks at the Syrian regime with suspicion. Let's remember that the president, Ahmed al-Shara, was on the American most wanted list until he trimmed his beard, put on a suit, and became the president of Syria. He was previously the leader of HTS, an al-Qaeda offshoot. So Israel hopes that this is a leopard that has changed its spots, but fears that he is a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Okay.
There are behind-the-scenes talks between Israel and Syrian officials towards normalization. And if Syria makes the brave decision to support peace with Israel, Israel will, of course, welcome that.
Which takes me to my next point. Israel's attacks on Syria risk undermining ceasefires that have been established, weakening the authority of the central government, and fueling regional tensions, destabilising a country that's already grappling with internal power divisions and post-Assad problems. Is the destabilisation of Syria in Israel's interests?
Israel's interest is to have a peaceful Syria that respects its minorities and wants to make peace with Israel. That is what Israel wants. That is why there are talks happening behind the scenes to establish normalization with the Syrian government. The new regime, even though Israel views it with distrust, has been beneficial in many ways because it has taken Syria out of the Iranian axis, blocked the smuggling route from Iran to Hezbollah. And Israel wants the Syrian regime to be able to have enough control of its territory that it can stop the Iranian axis rearming its proxy forces in the region.
All right.
But the Israeli government is under intense domestic pressure, not from the far right or from settlers, but from Druze in Israel. They're a well-integrated minority.
That's understood. We're running out of time, and I want to get this just on that point, on the internal pressure within Israel. As we came on air, it was announced that another ultra-Orthodox party is talking about quitting the government, leaving Benjamin Netanyahu without a parliamentary majority after another one quit yesterday. Do you see that changed political landscape having any effect on Israel's actions in Syria or indeed in Gaza?
That's a very good question. Benjamin Netanyahu, if these parties leave the government, will end up becoming a minority government. Elections will have to be held by autumn of next year, and their departure from the government obviously brings forward the risk of early elections. What the Israeli government is doing now, its stated policy, is to pursue a temporary ceasefire in Gaza, hoping to get half of the hostages out and hoping that that will allow for diplomatic talks to get an end of the war that will see Hamas relinquish power and allow the region to turn a new leaf. And these parties have said they will support a hostage deal, even from the opposition.
OK, that's very clear. Thanks for joining us. Former Israeli government spokesperson.
My pleasure.
Eylon Levy, thank you. Right, let's pick through this with Zedoun Alzoubi, who's a Syrian governance and peace-building expert. Welcome back to DW, Zedoun. Long-standing grievances between Druze factions and Bedouin tribes erupted into open violence in May of this year. they seem to calm down. Why have they erupted again now?
To be very, very frank with you, the Bedouin tribes and forces actually installed one checkpoint that kept really humiliating the Druze community. And at one point of time, this exploded. The government was supposedly to go in and to separate the two sides. Unfortunately, it escalated into more violence between the government and the Druze factions. So far, the situation is deteriorating. I don't think things are now manageable or containable. The situation is really, really dire. There are many reports of massive human rights violations inside the city, and unfortunately, we don't see the sound of reason from any of the sides to try to at least let the civil defense to go in and save the civilians.
Okay, so and that's really interesting because that has been the charge, that the Syrian government deployed troops to Suwaida, and those government forces or factions loyal to the government then took sides and attacked the Druze militias. Why does that happen? Why has that happened in this instance?
Well, from my point of view, this cannot be seen from the moment of yesterday or day before yesterday. This has to go back a couple of months. There has been many negotiations taking place between the government and the Druze leadership, mainly Al-Hajari. He's like one of the three clerics that actually govern the city somehow. And there was some need for the state institutions to go inside the city, and so that unify the country, if you like. There was a lot of hesitance inside the cleric leadership, especially with Hajari. And then at many point of time, there was an agreement, and then this agreement actually collapsed. And then I think the government took opportunity of the clashes between the Bedouins and the Druze community to do by force what it could not do by negotiations. However, to be very, very clear, this does not justify the massive violations that are taking place right now. And we need to rescue their civilians. Civilians should not pay for the decision of a cleric here or a military there. There is a need for ceasefire now.
Because now, of course, Israel has taken upon itself to do that. They have taken upon themselves they say, to protect Syria's Druze community, which clearly Syria's central government, Syria's interim government, has been unable to do, and indeed has been complicit in victimizing.
Well, I mean, see, let's look at Israel since October 2023. I mean, Israel has not stopped its wars against Palestinians in Gaza, against Lebanese, against and Syrians. It has attacked Syria many times. It's not the first time. Actually, the moment Assad, the dictator, collapsed, they bombed the entire military of the country. So, and it has done lots of, advancement inside the Syrian territories, occupying more territories. And now Israel wants to convince us that it wants to rescue the Druze community, and this is why it is bombing Damascus. This is ridiculous. Israel wants one thing, actually, wants a buffer zone by occupying more territories. So it has occupied Golan Heights in 1967. It has occupied more territories after December 8, 2024. And now it seems that it is willing to occupy more and more lands under the alibi and pretext of protecting the Druze community, which cannot, cannot be believed by anyone from us. We know that Israel wants to expand and Israel wants to occupy more land, which is something no Syrian whatsoever from the Druze community or from other communities will accept or tolerate.
But all these things can be true at the same time, can't they? It can be true that Israel wants to protect the Druze community. Israel wants to expand its territory around Golan, and Syria's interim government has taken sides in a conflict and is unable to exercise impartial authority in the south of the country. All those things can be true at the same time.
If the Syrian government does not show, is taking sides, we allow a foreign power to come and rescue one community. I mean, is this the international law? Is this something that is acceptable by international community? If something goes wrong in a neighboring country here to Germany, we allow Germany to go in and separate. This is not acceptable. Who would accept that? Why do we have a United Nations? Why do we have a Security Council? If there is something that has to be solved, okay, let's go to the international law. Not allowing Israel to bomb the palace or bomb Damascus under the alibi of protecting a community.
And why do you, time is short, so let's pick up that point on a final question. Why do you believe there has been so little international outcry against Israel's actions in the south, in Syria?
Because Israel has been bombing Gaza for 2 years, and no one is talking about it, right? Gaza bombed Lebanon, and no one is talking about it. Israel launched a war against other countries, and no one speaks about it. Israel is allowed in this region to do what it wants to do, and actually thinking that this brings peace to the region and the world. On the contrary, the more Israel occupies, the less peace we have in this region, and the less peace we have in the world. The more Israel bombs other territories and other countries, the less peace we have in this. This is obvious. I mean, is this something that I have to explain? I have to explain why bombing a country bombs other country brings less peace to the world? This is something obvious. But I don't know why we insist on saying, yeah, Israel has to protect its national security. Yeah, and what about the national security of other countries? Understood. Is this something that is given to Israel? This is not acceptable. And we Syrians will not accept that, no matter where we are, which community do we belong to.
Thank you, Zedoun, for talking us through that so clearly. Zedoun Alzoubi, a Syrian governance and peace-building expert. Sara Stachelhaus is a Syria expert and programme coordinator at the Heinrich Böll Foundation. That's a think tank affiliated with Germany's Green Party. She joins us from Beirut. Welcome to DW. Do Israel's expanded strikes on Syria, expanded to include the capital, Damascus, does that represent a significant escalation?
The strikes today that we saw certainly was a significant escalation on top of the clashes that were happening in the past days in Swaida, triggered as a local conflict between the Bedouin tribes and the Druze armed militias, which then escalated when the government forces from Damascus intervened for the first time, going into Swaida for the first time since the fall of the regime.
And is the Israeli military intervention in Syria, is that really about protecting the Druze religious community? Well,
the claimed reason by the Israeli leadership is to protect the Jewish community, as you said, due to the clashes that are happening in Swaida, a claim, by the way, to protection that many members of the Druze community reject. And indeed, it is little credible if we look at the past, if we look at the many thousands killed by Assad in the past decade, as well as the ISIS attack on Swaida in 2018. Excuse me, this is an electricity cut in Beirut, where Israel did not decide to intervene. Hence, if we look at the situation now, there's a demand to withdraw from Swaida to the authorities in Damascus. So the interest here seems more to be that Israel does not want the authorities from Damascus close to their border, close to the Golan Heights that are Israeli occupied, and the territory that Israel has been occupying additionally since the fall of the regime in December.
I was talking to another Syria analyst a little earlier, and he was very angry about the lack of worldwide condemnation of Israel's actions in Syria. The world does seem to have been very quiet on Israel attacking another sovereign nation.
It is quite detrimental, considering that there has been no voiced or tangible threat coming out of Damascus. Al-Shara, after taking power in December, has signaled from the beginning an openness towards Israel, signaling they do have nothing to fear from the new authorities, despite the fact that the Israeli military destroyed 80% of the army's infrastructure within the first 48 hours after the fall of the regime. The USA has been pushing for rapprochement between Israel and Syria in the past month. There has been communication between these two countries, and in general, a positivity towards this track by the current leadership in Damascus. Hence, it does indeed seem that Israel is preferring a chaotic state in his neighborhood rather than a state on the road to recovery that it can build relationships with in the future.
Right. And you do see these attacks on Syria as being destabilizing for the interim government?
Certainly. I mean, the situation in Syria has been unstable even without the attacks. I mean, we see the clashes and the violence also committed by government forces in Sweden against civilians. We've seen it a few months ago in the coastal areas. And Syria has a long road to go to economic recovery, political transition, and justice. And these Israeli interventions derail any efforts and the small chance that Syria has on this road to recovery and stabilization.
And so a brief word then on how or if destabilizing Syria would be in Israel's interests.
Currently, Israel has been occupying new territory in Syria after December 8th, including some strategic water sources in the south. As you said, we have been missing a larger outcry for that. And it does seem that having a chaotic or unstable environment does justify the self-defense rather than a stable neighbor that you can be building relationships with.
Thanks for talking us through that, Sara. Sara Stachelhaus from the Heinrich Böll Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our correspondent Tania Krämer, she joins us now from Jerusalem with the latest. Tania, Israel has been carrying out strikes on Sweden since Monday, and now it's expanded its attacks to Damascus. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, this comes after the Israeli Defense Minister, Israel Katz, had actually put out a statement saying the time for warnings is over now. It's time for painful blows. And then we saw those strikes. One that was confirmed by the Israeli military here at the military headquarters in Damascus. They argue that this is where the military operation of the Syrian forces in Sweden are being coordinated. But there's also another strike that has been confirmed now by the Israeli military here, what they described a military target in the area of the presidential palace in Damascus. They have not given any more information on what that military target was so far. Now, what they have also told us here is that over the past day, they have struck tanks and rocket launchers and weapons on pickup trucks and also roads leading to the area to make sure that the government forces could not reach the Sweda area. And all of this, of course, as you said, the argument here is that they don't want those regime forces near the border area with the occupied Golan Heights or with Israel, as well as, in a way to protect the Jews minority there.
Israeli Druze, we understand they've been crossing the border into Syria. And how is the Israeli government responding to what is a clear escalation?
Well, yeah, there were quite some chaotic scenes, despite the fact that the Israeli military said that they are reinforcing actually the whole area, and it's a heavily fortified area in that sense. But what you have to understand, there are very close ties between, the Druze communities. There many have relatives in Sweden that are living on the occupied Golan Heights, and what we've been seeing is that, also on social media, a lot of videos were circulating of this very harsh violence that is happening there in Sweden, that has, brought the concern to people here that they have to go and help their relatives in the area. So we saw people crossing there, and we had Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressing the situation himself in a video, saying, calling on those people to stop crossing or trying to get there, come and to return and let the Israeli military, as he said it, do their job. Now, again, in this effort to protect the Druze community in Sweden.
And Tania, to do their job, why is Israel carrying out these strikes in support of Syria's Druze minority?
Well, I mean, the official line here is, of course, that there are very strong bonds between the Druze communities. There are Druze on the occupied Golan Heights. There are Druze in Syria, but also in Lebanon. Now, of course, this is not a monolithic society, but a community rather. But there are strong family bonds, and there have been, strong relations between those communities. And Israel has early on said, they are protecting the Druze community there on the Syrian side. Now, of course, this is also been seen, as Israel is saying itself, it's also protecting this area. If you remember, the Israeli military moved into the buffer zone once the Assad regime fell, and there's still a lot of concern among Druze also here in Israel. Not all of them, by the way, have the Israeli citizenship. There are also different Druze communities you have on the Golan Heights as the Syrian Druze. Most of them do not have the Israeli citizenship, but still they have been, supportive of parts of it, of Israel protecting the Jewish communities in Syria. But of course, they're also saying, that Israel is protecting the area. And of course, on the other hand, Syria, the government there is seeing this, of course, as impacting on their sovereignty. So this is certainly not ending anytime soon. And we're hearing as well here from the military that they're preparing for, some time now, that this could continue for the coming days.
DW's Tania Krämer with the latest from Jerusalem. Tania, as always, thank you.